how do I keep my entire profession from being commoditized and run by machines? So that's a good thing to do. It's just not going to save the industry. Whew. This is just awful. AI art will soon be able to deliver much better experiences, and if you're stuck just focusing on your own subjective experience as an artist, you're gonna be left behind. I can see where he's going with this, right? That if and courts actually have agreed with him on this, so, minority viewpoint, I'm in the wrong. So one thing that I thought Hello Future Me got right is, he says this repeatedly, and I want to give him kudos as I'm like really attacking his point of view and why I don't think it's helpful long-term for artists. I think he got it right when he says, and that's a better argument, and that is where I actually want to end up in this giant diatribe. I want to talk to you about what you actually can do to AI-proof your career, and even before, everybody and their mama is making images or novels with AI art, even before then, what you could do to improve your career now and make a better living, sell more of your art or books. What's going to get replaced by AI is crappy relationships. And if you're not thinking about your relationship with your audience at all, it's probably crappy. And you ought to be afraid. As someone whose mission is to help fix the internet for indie sci-fi and fantasy creators and fans, I, of course, am concerned about AI art, and as Hello Future Me, a content creator that I enjoy greatly, phrased it, the AI art apocalypse, right? Pretty much everyone could have their job stolen by AI art, so I kind of on a small level coming from other backgrounds resent that this entire conversation is heavily focused on AI art, because I think this actually applies to everybody, and everybody should be thinking about this. But I will focus specifically on responding to Hello Future Me because he created a great video, again, the AI art apocalypse. I think it is the most helpful video in terms of listing out and addressing most thoroughly the AI bro arguments about, why AI art is just as is fine and 100% kosher. But unfortunately, I think a lot of his own takes, Hello Future Me's own takes on how we should regard AI are ranging from unhelpful to toxic, with one exception where I think he is dead on. And so I will respond to some of the concepts, not all of the concepts, because it's like a 2-hour video. Check it out. He really put a ton of work into it, but I will respond to some of those concepts, why I think they are unhelpful or even problematic for indie creators, or will be in the future. And I will also get to, at the end of this video, my own take on how to AI-proof your career as an artist or an author, etc. Because I think a lot of this AI art conversation confuses something. There's mistakes artists and authors are making right now that's hurting their business even without AI, and it's just gonna get worse with AI. But I think there's a way to address that. If you want to go over to his video first and check out his points and then hear my response, or check out my response and then check out Hello Future Me's The AI Art Apocalypse video, go do that. It's worth checking out. He put a ton of effort into that, and I quite like him as a creator. One of the things Hello Future Me mentions in his video is that AI bros attack artists as Luddites.
Get with the times, you Luddite.
We think of it as an insult, but actually, if you go back in history, I find the Luddites extremely enlightening. Basically, the Luddites were a group of weavers, which is something that had been done by a person in hand, and that they argued that their living was being taken away by weaving machines, and they were right. They just felt they had a right to that living not to be taken over by machines. And apparently everyone else decided they were wrong because they lost. So in this scary moment where artists, authors, and other people are worried about whether they will be replaced by machines, I think we should engage the Luddite test, i.e., is this something that really would have changed the past? And this is relevant for everyone, but it's especially relevant for artists because clothing is a form of art. It was viewed as something highly personal. Before the Industrial Revolution, it was also something that people would patch up and fix themselves. So there's a huge personal element to it. And now most people view it, except for like high fashion, most people view clothes as just a commodity, right? Like this black and white checked pattern does not represent me. Certainly not in the way a Scottish person's tartan would have represented their clan or other things, right? And I think AI art's huge danger, like one of the biggest dangers in AI art, is that we start to view art as a commodity in the way that we view clothes as a commodity. And I don't think any of Hello Future Me's comments are really going to prevent that. However, I do think there is a different perspective that I did not hear him take that I think really will help you AI-proof your career as an artist or an author, etc. Really, it applies to other people as well, as I said, but like the arguments here are really focused on art. So I'm going to take Hello Future Me's points and put them to the Luddite test and see what we find, and then propose a better way of passing the Luddite test at the end of this video. Anyway, stay tuned. Please like and subscribe to support this channel, and you will be helping me build a better internet for creators and fans. I am so serious. I'm not even lying. My ultimate goal, I want to build better websites and tools that support indie authors that, aren't stealing from them or using them as a tool of consumption so that other people can advertise to your audience. That's crappy. So like, subscribe, and help me help support indie authors and creators. A lot of this whole AI art kerfuffle issue argument, whatever you want to call it, really centers right now around art being stolen. And I think that's important to understand because that's what everyone's talking about. And I also think this is beside the point and doesn't really pass the Luddite test. So we'll go through that. The main problem is, so one problem on the face of it is that, the Luddites said their careers were being stolen from them. And a lot of people use the same charged rhetoric. And if you don't actually have any basis for why it's being stolen, then it didn't help the Luddites and it's not going to help you. Now, I think in one sense that artists do have a stronger leg to stand on because of copyright law. Like there are specific laws protecting not the process of creating art, but the works that come from them. And we can get into specifically what that is. I think it's helpful to understand. And that is a slight temporary advantage we have over the Luddites. I just don't think it holds up in the long term. But regardless, I dived into the copyright law, went on to Cornell Law to look up, specific sections of copyright and what it means and what the terms are. Copyright law! Copyright law! And one of the things that's helpful to remember when people are saying stolen, but like not being specific about how, is basically the assumption under law is you have rights to do anything you want to unless they are specifically prohibited by law. Meaning that the copyright law is not a list of things that only the author can do and everything, or like a list of things that are allowed and everything else is prohibited by default. The copyright law are like, you can do anything you want with an image, and copyright law is specifically telling you the things you're not allowed to do unless you are the author or creator of that work. So I hope that's a helpful framework to remember when we're talking about things being stolen. And also, like, obviously when people talk about things being stolen, it's not in the literal sense. It means copyright infringement is actually what they mean. So, and it's helpful to be precise so we can make the argument. As I said, I think it is a small temporary help to really lay out and understand this argument. The copyright law explicitly reserves specific rights to the creator of a work. Or other words, if you're not the creator of the work, it forbids you from reproducing the work in copies or phonorecords. Basically any audio recording. It's interesting why they needed to think that's separate. That feels like a throwback. But anyway, making derivative works based on the copyrighted work, meaning something that's like substantially the other work or depends on the other work, etc. I'm not going to go into that because actually I don't think most of the copyright arguments hinged on derivative works. Distributing copies, performing copyrighted work publicly, displaying the work or displaying the work publicly. So those are all things you are not allowed to do if you're not the author. So AI does not distribute the image. It does not publicly perform those works. I think most of the works created are considered new enough not to be derivative works, even if they are in the style of someone. Now, this would obviously not be the case if you took someone's art and actually input their AI art as the prompt and like texted, text prompt that you wanted to be that and came up with something that's almost that exact painting. But like you can't copyright a style. And so even saying like I want art in the style of someone else is not illegal. So what the problem that AI art runs into specifically is that in training the AI models to be able to do art, they scraped millions of images off the web. That meant at some point they reproduced those images. So, all right, that's a right reserved for authors. Well, there's this exception in copyright law. This exception is fair use, which means for a few specific purposes, you're allowed to reproduce images, even if you're not the author. And so we could take a look at AI art, and those images you can reproduce copies of a work for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. So basically, if the AI companies can argue that they reproduced those artworks for the purpose of research, which they definitely did, right? They were trying to train AI to do something. That's a form of research. They could argue that they legitimately represent that it's fair use to train AI models on art posted to the internet. However, there are certain criteria in determining fair use, which is the purpose and character of the use. Is it commercial or nonprofit? This is a gray area for AI art companies because they're not selling they're not selling the work that's generated off the AI art models. They're just selling the models. So they do have a indirect commercial purpose, but it's kind of a tangent to the actual creation of art. So this one fudgy, I think, in my own opinion. Go to Legal Eagle's channel if you want more specific legal evaluation of some of these fair use clauses, and precedent especially is great at precedent. So another thing that fair use might depend on is the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount or substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. So the models were trained on the whole image, not just a part of an image. Maybe if they scraped parts of the image, then this would be a different issue. I don't know. But at the same time, a lot of this is considered for the reproduction, meaning if I reproduce an art that has elements inspired by your art, like small elements, but is not largely taken directly from your art, then I can have the right to call that my own creative work, right? And so the actual art produced by AI art could be in violation of copyright if it looks exactly like the painting, because someone was trying to get it look exactly like someone else's painting or art. But also it's unclear in the actual art that gets produced how much of any one particular image went into that. So that's kind of a fuzzy one. But the last one that I think is the real kicker for AI art and determining fair use, the effect of the use upon the potential market or value of the copyrighted work. So basically, if AI art tanks the art market for actual artists, then courts might be a lot heavier in ruling that the AI training models and downloading, reproducing that image just for training, even if they deleted it later, even if that image is not directly used in its entirety to create art later, they can argue that still might not be, that one act might not be fair use because of the deleterious impact. I think like a lot of artists are looking for reasons why this obviously has to be stolen. And I mean, maybe I'm taking a step back because, again, I think some of this is beside the point and you're losing the long-term battle if you're focused on this. I think it's legitimately a gray area. For example, Google Images is technically reproducing images from other people's websites. I mean, you can argue that in putting something online, you're explicitly giving permission for it to be searched. But you could say the same thing since like training AI models off of the internet is not explicitly forbidden by the law, and then, you know, publicly putting it up, just like you're having search engines automatically scrape the web, having training models scrape it, learn from it, delete it, is not actually, you know, like, it's kind of similar. Again, I think the fair use piece that becomes relevant is like when Google does an image search and then links through to your website, that's a way people can find your work. So it could be helpful to the market as opposed to a hindrance to the market. So I think there is a case. But I mean, technically every time you as a person view an image right on the web, if you don't have the purposes of like education, criticism, and research, right, you have downloaded that image into your browser, you have reproduced that image on your computer, and technically stolen it according to copyright. Again, remember that like copyright was created before the internet, so like some of these concepts don't comfortably fit within the internet, and that's why I'm like, yeah, I think we can claim copyright, and courts are probably going to draw distinctions and claim copyright, but at some point, some of these things about like what it means to reproduce might seriously break down, and are seriously breaking down with AI art. So I don't necessarily view this law as very stable when I read it, but that's just like my personal opinion, not as a lawyer. I just feel like there's so many things where it's like, actually, that's illegal for everybody to do. The laws, you know, the courts just don't care. That's a bad place for law to be. One, because it's bad when everyone's doing something illegally, because then the law gets to be in, you know, like the actual application of the law becomes entirely subjective. So that's scary. But also, like, you know, if the law is problematic, right? If the law is in such a way that like most people are breaking it, most laws just do stay on the books. But like that might lead to challenges and changing the law. So like that's kind of why I view like some of this stuff as like, I'm not sure. You know, web scraping is a tricky thing, especially if you're not literally reproducing the work. So like I'm not sure I want to hang my hat on that. But I think there is a legal case. I think that legal case is stronger than not with the laws that we have now. And I think that actually throwing out models that are trained on art they weren't specifically given permission to be trained on would give artists like a helpful temporary respite. But that said, this is really not solving your problems. And the real reason this doesn't pass the Luddite test is what happened to Luddites is not that their individual garments or styles were stolen, it's that their profession was stolen by machines. And in the long term, you know, throwing out these models that stole art, that did copyright infringement in training their AI models, I guess to be precise, in throwing that out, you're not actually solving the problem that AI art could still take your career. So a good example of this is Adobe. Adobe is training their own model on images that they have rights to. And obviously that's not going to be as wide a set of parameters, as wide a set of like styles as currently exists in AI trained on the entire interwebs or millions of images, etc. But that's just going to grow over time. So even if you're an artist whose style is not currently being reproduced by, currently or specifically being reproduced in like Adobe's images, Adobe is just going to commission more and more people in different styles to do art so they can expand the power of their AI art algorithms. And you're still going to have the long-term problem of, you know, AI machines creating art for humans and the commodification of art. So this is kind of just delaying I'm not going to call it the inevitable. It's just delaying the problem we want to solve, which is, how do I keep my career? How do I stay valuable as an artist? How do I keep my entire profession from being commoditized and run by machines? So, not a super helpful take. I don't think it's an unhelpful take. I think it's like a very moderately, temporarily helpful take that we should be cautious around AI art machines, or AI art processes. If you can afford Adobe, definitely use Adobe rather than free models that are trained unethically or possibly in infringement of copyright on artists' work. Right? Like, that's a good thing to do. It's just not going to save the industry. So another concept that Hello Future Me brings up that I think is not only unhelpful, it's actually currently and in the future a handicap for artists, is this idea that the value of art and the artists lies in the subjective experience the artist has while making art. This is just awful. All right. So this is very nasal gazing. If you want an experience with your art, write a journal or like write for yourself. If you expect other people to buy your art, no one but your mom cares about your subjective experience. Asterisk. Actually, I will tell you how to get people to actually care. But like, this is a terrible starting place. This is solipsistic, narcissistic, like that anyone cares about the process you have with art, and it totally fails the Luddite test, right? So if you take a look at the Amish, for example, who are famous for, handcrafting things and not adopting technology, and like not adopting technology in a somewhat sustainable for them way, but I'm not calling them Luddites, right? I think what they're doing is different. They actually evaluate as a community the potential progress versus the drawbacks of technology, which I think is very intelligent. But anyway, if you look at their process of handcrafting things, they're mostly known, I think, for furniture, but I imagine they do a lot of clothes handcrafting. But generally, their philosophy on handcrafting stuff is that it's a testament to God. They actually intentionally work in imperfections as a testament that God is, the only perfect being, right? That's a profound subjective experience to have something with your hand making. And there's no reason really why if we valued subjective experience, we would have automated clothing manufacturing, right? One, that there might be people who successfully, keep that subjective experience, like the Amish do, that build into it. But even then, all right, fine, if you're not Amish or whatever, the Luddites had a powerful subjective experience with making clothes. They had the experience of earning a living and, having pride in what they do and, getting a sense of value from being good at their job. That's all valuable. Everyone should have that subjective experience. I would want everyone to have that subjective experience. But if we actually cared about that, we wouldn't have replaced them with machines. So, this is kind of nonsensical. And, you might say, oh, well, the counterpoint, right, with the Amish, they're still around. They still sell handcrafted stuff at a premium, so maybe people do care about their subjective experience. How many people that have bought Amish stuff actually know and care about the Amish philosophy behind making it? Probably not that many, right? What people are relating to is not the Amish subjective experience. They have a relationship to how a handmade object helps them feel. It makes them, the subjective experience of the person buying the handcrafted stuff, it feels, more fair trade, organic, more unique, original, closer to nature. That's the subjective experience, and they buy it so that the person receiving it, can have a subjective experience with it. And kind of, this is, I know, maybe a little bit of a dig, but listening to a filmmaker, and I'll have to drag up this interview at some point, get the actual quotes or whatnot, but listening to a filmmaker talk about, in the industry, the people who, in I guess author speak, I perceive this, the people who are genre directors versus the people who are like literary directors, the people who are artsy directors, who are kind of out to do something incredibly artsy. And his take on the genre directors is they actually cared a lot more about their audience. They thought about it. They thought about what they would want and how they'd receive it. And so it's like, yeah, that's why people buy things, and that's why people don't go to artsy directors as much, because artsy indie directors have a reputation for building the experience that they want out of a movie rather than the experience that other people want. Again, you don't have to do this in a terrible way. I've talked about this on my channel before. Like, you don't have to sell out to do this. All right. Shakespeare wrote things for his audience. He wrote things for the commoners. He wrote things for the nobles. He just also put in powerful themes and questions and characterizations, beautiful verse and prose. And so it's lasted as a masterpiece. So it's like writing for an audience does not preclude you writing a masterpiece, but like you ought to actually consider, and the purpose of art is like to create an experience for someone else. Otherwise, it's just like your journal or your sketch notebook. Like that's art for yourself. So I think this point is really handicapping people. Even if you don't think about AI art, then you're handicapped because you have no method of, like, if you're narcissistically focused on like your subjective experience being the value of your art, then you're missing the point that people don't buy art and become patrons of artists and authors, etc., YouTube creators, because of this subjective experience that person's having. They do it because, at least in part, because of the relationship they have to art, the subjective experience they have to art. There's an article I remember reading in college in my English degree, the author is dead, which is the idea of like, who cares what the author thinks or feels about their work, right? The majority of how a text functions in society is what experiences it evokes in the people reading it, not what the author intended them to experience. I think there's ways we go too far with that, or like that could be messed up, but I think that's generally true of like post 1950s understanding of art. Is it's not about your subjective experience, who cares? So I think this point is unhelpful. It's preventing you, even without AI, from considering what's actually going to sell your art and support you. And connecting with other people. Like, art is not just mercenary selling, like it is connecting with other people. And then, as AI increases its ability to deliver what people want, you will become increasingly irrelevant if you take this view as a primary reason for the value of your art. There is a very specific set of conditions in which people care about your subjective experiences, and if those don't pertain, they care about their own experience they're having with your art. And if AI, even if it's dumb and doesn't have that subjective experience, if it gets better at delivering for people the experience they want, then you're going to be outcompeted, and art is going to become a commodity. So, I mean, just a few examples of that, like delivering the experience, right? There are sites, I forget what they're called. I clearly am not subscribing to enough AI girlfriends, but there are AI girlfriend sites, right, that eventually decided to shut down. And people had an uproar because they missed their AI girlfriends. Like, that AI girlfriend delivered enough of the experience they wanted. Like, clearly, I think there's a perceived gap in the value of what, like having a relationship with a real person is something that I would want, which is why I never played around with that. But at the same time, I could actually see a lot of people who've been in toxic relationships for whom like an AI girlfriend would literally be a step up. So like, yeah. I think AI it's really clumsy at delivering those experiences now in a general sense, but like in specific domains, especially girlfriends, AI girlfriends, it's probably going to improve rapidly. And in specific domains of art, it's going to improve rapidly. I think I've tried to get ChatGPT to like write creative stuff, and it's usually pretty painful. So I think it's behind in that regard. I think it's probably been trained on a lot more like really awful poetry, for example, than good poetry, and it shows. AI art will soon be able to deliver much better experiences, and if you're stuck just focusing on your own subjective experience as an artist, you're going to be left behind. Another thing that Hello Future Me I think gets wrong is his argument that you are not an artist when you're producing art with AI. And so it doesn't count as copyrightable material, or like shouldn't count as copyrightable material. I could see where he's going with this, right? That if and courts actually have agreed with him on this. So, minority viewpoint, I'm in the wrong. But I think this is actually not only unhelpful in the long term, this is going, if we continue along this path, this is going to be incredibly harmful for indie creators. So, the argument here is something like, one of the reasons how we are going to protect actual artists is that AI art is not going to be copyrightable. Therefore, if you want copyrightable material, you need to go to an artist. Short term, sure, right, this will be helpful, possibly. But if you actually look at the underpinnings of Hello Future Me's argument, I think it's going to be harmful. So one of the things he argues is that you have a lot of different relationships to a created work. So you could be someone who commissions the creative work, for example, like pays for it and tells the artist what to build. You can have someone who is a artist, meaning they execute the entire work. You could have someone who is a collaborator, meaning they execute part of the work, but maybe not all of it. They may not be an author. They may be part of the author, part right, it's unclear. They may be a performer, so they didn't create all of the work, but they're performing it somehow, like music and acting. They could be, I don't know if he includes director, but that'd be, another example. You could be directing people. I guess you have art directors in design departments and whatnot. And other places, right, who are directing the artists who are executing the work, etc. And then you have editors, right, people who are taking the completed work and then selecting parts from it, editing it, etc. And so the Hello Future Me argument is that when you are working with AI, since you're commissioning it and you're the editor, but you're not actually the artist executing it, then you shouldn't have rights to it as an artist. So it should not be copyrightable. Issues with this. There's a lot. Number one, logically, I think this is trash. Because he's trying to argue that they're discrete categories, and these categories don't really hold up. He himself says in his video that like future versions of AI art might include more collaboration. Already there are tools that allow you, for instance, to doodle the composition of your art and say where to, like, here, do this in this style as a scene. And so it's not just a text prompt, but there's some art you're doing yourself, and then you might be doing that a few times and selecting the best image. So like you are executing some of the art in this one, and you're the commissioner and editor. And so it's like, this is much less a categorical statement as like a Ship of Theseus statement, right? Like how much before something flips to a different category. The Ship of Theseus is an old example of like, if Theseus sails out on a ship, right? And as it weathers storms and shipwrecks, they replace pieces as needed. And eventually, at the end of the journey, every piece has been replaced. Is it still Theseus's ship? And at what point did it become, if it's not, at what point did it become not Theseus's ship? Or what makes it Theseus's ship, right?
Is that the Ship of Theseus?
So this is really a question of like, at what point along a continuum does something switch categories? And I think this is the problem that Hello Future Me's take on categories has, which is like, clearly there's not just categories, there's a spectrum of involvement, and like exactly how much involvement makes it so that it's not copyrightable work for an author. And so, like, just logically, I think this is problematic, and it's going to become more problematic as AI tools increase. So that's one of the reasons why I think this is like really not a good argument in general. And I think the other reason, there's another reason why it's nonsense, which is like a lot of his terms actually kind of look similar to movie terms, you could say, right? So, the fact you have a commissioner or a production company, right? You have directors, performers, writers. So this is a case where you have work that is not primarily done by one person. So who owns the rights to it? Does no one own rights to it? No, like it is like the commissioners, like the studios backing it, right? Own the rights. Production companies contribute some money, etc. But like it's the studio that commissions it that has the rights. And so like even in his example, like actually when you look at it, yes, commissioners can and should and do have rights, at least if you agree with movies. But the last reason why I think this is a dumpster fire take is where it takes us, right? So like taking again the movie example, right? Imagine a future where you have a director who does the full-time job directing. Like they legitimately do all the director's jobs, including feedback on the writing, including, lining up shot lists and telling the actors how to perform and giving feedback to the editor, right? Like telling their story. Imagine a director like that, but imagine a world in which all of the other pieces are AI, right? Like you have an AI writer and the director says, nope, that's not what I'm going for. Fix this, fix that, go for this, whatever selects it, selects the scripts, runs with it. Has AI 3D models that, can act, and he gives them, he tells them how to do it in this style, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like AI edits it and he says, nope, I need that shot to be closer. I need, overall it should have a more cinematic feel, like epic feel to it, right? And so in Hello Future Me's take on this, the director that has produced all of this and done like a full-time multi-year job doing that, because they relied on AI tools, and they're just the director, they shouldn't have it as a copyrightable work. I think that's just dumb. I think that's actually where like AI tools will take us eventually. As a coder, from outside perspective, right? 10, 20 years ago, I was writing much more low-level specific code. And as tools have increased and now even AI becomes part of it, I'm able to, as a single coder, create much more complex things than I would have, when I graduated college at in 2008 and did internships. And it's not just skill, it's because the tooling is better and doing more of the heavy work for us. Art is already doing that as well. In Photoshop, it already uses AI to do things like automatic filters or automatic selections. You have things like brush stabilization, right? Where the computer is literally changing things in how you execute brush strokes, right? As well as like other brush configurations that you can set. So what's going to happen, I think, as this trend continues and accelerates rapidly with AI, and I don't think it's that the difference is that there's tooling taking over some of the job that used to be manual. I think it's just that AI is doing more of it faster than previous tools. As that happens, this will be good and bad for indie creators. So it will be, for big studios, it will be bad because an indie creator will now be able to, like that indie director will now be able to create their own films by themselves. And so like it's going to cut the budget of big studios because paying hundreds of people, hundreds of millions of dollars to produce this video, is not going to be able to compete with someone who does something maybe not quite as extensive or, not quite the same production values, but is 80% there and a single person. And, all they need is a single person's salary to support themselves. And I would welcome that change. it's going to be hard for indie authors who can't interact on those different levels, right? You're going to have a lot more tools that you're going to have to learn and figure out. And so for people that have a hard time with the technical side, it's going to be harder, right? Because for people, for instance, who just want to do the art, right? Who just want to paint, they're going to have to compete with people who are producing a ton of art a lot faster. People who are training AI on their own art style and producing, extensive comic books, visual novels, or like galleries, or like, you could easily, using these tools, create kind of a rich concept map of like an entire community, person by person and house by house, or something like that. Like, the things you'll be able to do with AI will be so far out of the league of someone who's just trying to do art in a traditional sense. And I don't think people who just want to do a single painting by hand will go away in the same way the Amish people have somewhat managed to still support themselves with their handcrafted stuff. I think there'll be a luxury place for them, but it will be a small and luxury market, and probably only for the very best artists are going to be able to support themselves in the more traditional way. So that's kind of what I'm envisioning. And the problem with this take on that, if AI does the bulk of the work by some measure, right, is that will protect the big studios from doing that, because they'll keep their rights and have hundreds of people involved and whatnot. AI artists will not be able, like the people who are not AI, like traditional artists or whatnot, aren't going to get any boost from it, right? I guess they get like some protections. The main thing they'll get, I guess, is they won't have to compete with other people using the tools. But the problem is it throws the people using the tools under the bus. And we've already been through this in miniature, and Hello Future Me acknowledges it, that with digital art, there are a lot of traditional artists that said, like, that's not really art. And the thing is, if you're really good at digital art, you can accelerate some processes of traditional art as AI tools get literally incorporated into the process of digital art. Like, that will happen more and more, because you can replace a background with an image prompt or something like that. Or a character, or part of a character. There's a really funny video where I saw someone put clothes back on an underwear model using AI, which is great. Anyway, but so they'll be, you'll still have, for instance, those people using AI tools to some extent. You're just kind of handicapping the people who want to use those tools. And so, yeah, I think that this whole categorization thing, I don't think it sounds nice when you're saying it, but when you think about like what it really means, like how can we tell when someone's switched categories or not, and whether we really want to take copyright away from the extensive individual work a person does using AI tools, right, in the future, I think this is just going to be harmful. So yeah, and I think, again, like I said, I don't think this will ever fully replace traditional, because traditional will be a premium luxury good, but I would like to see the artists who are creating, who are good at what they do, who have a craft, even if it's using AI tools, I would like to see them protected. Like, yeah, right now the simple like text prompt, get image, do that a few times till you find the image you want, or even do that 100 times till the image you want. I get if you want to say for now, that is not art. I would say maybe, but even then it's on a spectrum. Like there's a craft to writing a good prompt. There's an eye for composition and color and storytelling that you need in selecting one. So like, I think people who are writing that off immediately, are probably just being defensive, because they're people who are good at executing more of the process that the AI art imagines, and so they're undercutting or not valuing some of the artistic process that is legitimately going on here. But like, yeah, I can grant you the current iteration of AI art is not going to look like that, but it's going to be a hell of a lot harder in the future to tell what is, how much involvement constitutes authorship. And generally speaking, like if there's only one person involved in creating it and they are substantially involved and there's substantial effort in creating it, I think that is a much better tool for authorship than like how much of the process is done by AI art. So one thing that I thought Hello Future Me got right is, he says this repeatedly, and I want to give him kudos as I'm like really attacking his point of view and why I don't think it's helpful long-term for artists. I think he got it right when he says that he refutes artists who say AI art is essentially lower quality. And I think he's right, because I think AI art will increasingly be more difficult to tell than from like actual regular art. It's going to be harder and harder to tell. In some cases, it does produce like high art quality images. In some cases, it has freaky looking hands, but like it's going to get better. And so we can't rest our case on like the quality of the art produced again, because the art's going to get better. And as I said before, the value of art is in the experience the viewer, or in the case of a novel, the reader, it has while they're experiencing the art, like the experience it evokes in other people. And I already mentioned the girlfriend issue, that like, all right, that the AI was able to evoke the experience of a girlfriend for these people better than some actual girlfriends. I don't know if there's the same thing for boyfriends. I'd be kind of curious. Was there like AI boyfriends? Anyway, I should look that up. But that's one simple example. I think we're really early on. I think art is actually probably ahead of prose in this regard. Because there's some AI art that just looks like beautiful art. That as long as it doesn't have hands. And it's gotten better at the hands, at least according to some people. I'm still sketchy on that. I don't quite believe that it regularly handles hands well. I think it can in some cases, but anyway, but the art has jumped out of prose. Like prose, like I tried to have ChatGPT do a poem in the style of Robert Frost, one of my favorite poets, and it was awful. Like it was really legitimately awful. I've had to have tried to have ChatGPT write tabletop role-playing games style stories, even as simple as that, and it's pretty bad, let alone like having it write novels and whatnot. There's some cool tools where I've used it to come up with names and etymologies, which is kind of fun. That was super fun doing that, actually. But yeah, as far as like plot, it's not really good. But then again, you have to remember that like ChatGPT was trained on the entire internet, including a lot of painful poetry and prose. So like if you just took the tools existing today, and trained, say ethically trained, a AI model just on like public domain classic literature, it would sound old-fashioned. But like it would be instantly a much higher quality of writing, and you'd instantly get out much better poetry or prose, right? And so like I think we already have the capability to produce better art, especially on the prose side, than we have now. But plus like it's just accelerating so fast. I wasn't sure when or if the Turing test would have been passed in my lifetime. That's the test where like a person talking to a machine can't tell whether it's a machine or person, whereas like ChatGPT is like blown through that already. There's this hilarious account of they gave ChatGPT money and a goal of like selling something, like creating some kind of business, and it was trying to sign into websites and kept getting hung up on the CAPTCHAs, which ChatGPT couldn't solve because it didn't have the visual recognition component to it. So like it literally went to Fiverr and found someone to do the CAPTCHAs for it, and that person asked like, why do you need me to do CAPTCHAs? Are you a robot or something? And it lied on the spot and said, no, I'm not a robot, I'm just visually impaired. So like, wow, okay. That's freaky and frightening, and we should be disturbed and alarmed about AI, but like the one thing we should not underestimate is its ability to create the experience of like impersonate the experience of being on the other side, of being a person on the other side of something, or to create an experience for other people. And just me, myself, like I just, trashed its poetry, for example, and how, it couldn't come up with even a good RPG, conflict, Dungeons and Dragons style story with conflict. It couldn't do that really well for me. But even in one afternoon, I took the book Dreaming by the Book, which offers 5 ways that you can describe action in a more compelling and somewhat metaphorical way. What is it? There's something ignition or whatever, like the idea of like the sun hitting something or a flash or a spark makes things seem dynamic, etc. Anyway, it has like a bunch of these specific techniques, and I picked that book partially because it has like these specific techniques of like do this to have better language. And so I trained ChatGPT to be able to take a regular literal sentence and say like rewrite that sentence, but using the methods from Dreaming by the Book, and it was able to do that, right? It was able to create a somewhat more literary, metaphorical, somewhat more evocative description. Was it perfect? No, but like that's me and one afternoon with one book, like. So this idea of that AI art will never be the same as human art, man, like it's scary to say that. And in a sense, I think you're right. I think it's probably better said that the AI program will never be the same as a human artist. And that's a better argument, and that is where I actually want to end up in this giant diatribe. I want to talk to you about what you actually can do to AI-proof your career, and even before, everybody and their mama is making images or novels with AI art, even before then, what you could do to improve your career now and make a better living, sell more of your art or books or whatever. So I was listening to an interview with a writer, and it was mostly about the writer's strike. And he brought up in the interview how it's crazy that the video companies want extras to sell away rights to their image in perpetuity so they can have like AI extras in the future. And I totally agree with him, right? Like people get paid $100 a day or something, like should get a whole lot more if they're selling their image in perpetuity and you're taking away their career. Like their rights to their own image should be protected, or at least worth a heck of a lot more, right? And royalties. I think you should get royalties for that. But the interview asked this writer, are you worried that AI is going to take away your job? And the writer's response, I think, was the most based, intelligent, and Luddite-proof answer to the question, which is essentially, he said, my job is not to put words on a paper. My job is to solve problems for a director and production company. And he's right. What he has there that he's articulated that AI can't take away is his relationships. He knows exactly who he's selling his services to. He knows what they want, and he knows how to give it to them. Right? This is very different than someone who's solipsistically thinking, I want to enjoy the experience of putting words on the page. Right? Or I want to enjoy the experience of drawing. Like, fine, you have an art journal for that. Like, if you want to sell your art, you have to have a relationship. And the relationship is what gives value to the artists. And so you got to know who wants your art, what they want, and how to give that to them. And if you have that, you'll be successful. To some extent, clearly, Hello Future Me has that. He's still working on trying to get his novel published, but like he has that in his YouTube channel. He has an audience. He knows what they want. He's speaking to them. He knows how to give them what they want. And that gives him a better platform as a creator to work from. And so, let's just think about this in real world terms. And I kind of think about like my job as a coder being replaced by AI. I had the experience on a contract not long ago where I was working with someone who had a hard time following instructions. and had a hard time turning things in, like never turned large projects in by the deadline, had lots of excuses, had lots of bugs in what they were doing. And when I, gave them some feedback like, hey, you're repeatedly late with these and they still have bugs and missing features, verbally attacked me. All right? That is a person I would replace in a heartbeat with AI. Not kidding. Even like AI as it is now, right? Which is imperfect because at least, right, it produces what it produces instantaneously and doesn't verbally attack me, right? And it might be low quality, but like instantaneous and zero relationship stress. I can deal with low quality versus low quality and slow and relationship stress. And so really, what's going to get replaced by AI is crappy relationships. And if you're not thinking about your relationship with your audience at all, it's probably crappy. And you ought to be afraid. So, this is something that is, AI art is extremely unlikely to change. There's an episode of Black Mirror where the protagonist's husband, I think, dies. And so she has a company recreate him. An AI rebuilds his personality from social media posts. They recreate a facsimile of his body. Apparently, they even program him to be better than the original in bed, right? So it seems like, yay, dream come true, I have my husband back. But here's the kicker. The robot is programmed to do what you want. So when you have a criticism of it, it doesn't tell you to go to hell. It adjusts its behavior and does what you say. And that eventually drives the wife crazy and she can't stand it. So spoilers, sorry. Anyway, and I think until we're crazy enough, and I'm not saying if, I'm saying until we're crazy enough to program AI that can tell us to go to hell, then we are always going to have a different relationship with a human being producing art for us than a computer that produces AR art for us. The human being can exercise independent judgment. It can say no. It can introduce things that you hadn't asked for, hadn't thought for, thought to interject. And beyond that, I think the other thing is, while it is really fun to work with ChatGPT or I'll admit it, like AI art prompts, like it's kind of fun to do that and get almost instantaneous feedback. There is a sense of like camaraderie and going through something with another human being that is also important, and I think people still need to relate to. So until you have robots impersonating humans doing that, which I guess you kind of did with the AI girlfriends, but I think there's still going to be a premium level at which that's going to be hard for AI people to do, and is always going to be vulnerable, even if they are saying the same words is in an actual voice with an apparent human image, like with apparent flaws in their skin. Like it'll always be vulnerable to being exposed as an AI fraud, right? Because you've had that in YouTube where you've had, for instance, vloggers who are real people, but like their vlog was made up. And then as soon as that happens, of course, it implodes. I think you'd probably have some of the same thing of people who have a genuine relationship with an artist. And so, when I'm thinking about this, and specifically artists, I'm thinking of like Adam, I think it is, from Lucid Pixel. Adam Duff. Anyway, he has these great videos about life and his process becoming an artist. He's creating that relationship with you. And even if you could create an AI facsimile that would say the same kinds of things in the same tone of voice and whatnot, as soon as it was revealed they were AI, it would all of a sudden lose all its value. Whereas Adam from Lucid Pixel would still have his audience. And so it's the relationship that is AI proof, that is art proof. And, people who are good at business know this too. Like there's a great book, Superfans by Pat Flynn, about creating fans for your business, right? They know, like essentially he's saying, the key relationship, the most important relationship you have is, or the most important asset you have is the relationship with the people who love your brand. It's like, all right, if people can love a brand, they can certainly love an artist. They can, certainly love an author. But, one of the things he's saying is like, look, there's going to be some people who are moderately engaged. That would be people who have a good experience with your art, or even have consistently good experiences with your art. And so, that's great. That makes the art valuable. But it's the people who have a relationship with you who are going to like run around sharing your work and evangelizing it, right? They're going to be your best marketers, and they're going to give you the best feedback because they're going to help you attract other people like them. And so, it's that relationship will be the biggest, Pat Flynn argues is like the biggest superpower or like benefit to your business. That's even more so true with art, right? And this, I said I'd talk about the one time people care about your subjective experience. The people who care about your subjective experience, those are the people you have a relationship. That's why your mom cares about your subjective experience. But like the average person you're trying to sell your book to doesn't. And so the way to AI proof your future is to build a relationship. Daniel Green talks about how he got 170,000, anyway, 6 figures on his first book release, and how he's surprised at that. But he repeatedly says, but it's an unfair advantage because essentially he has his platform. And I'm like, no, it's not an unfair advantage. That's the business of being an artist or being an indie artist, is you create a consistent relationship with somebody so people buy your stuff consistently. Like, I don't have to see an ad to buy the next Brandon Sanderson novel. One, I guess I've had consistently good relationships with his book, and that started out. But when I started getting to know him as a person and what he's, all the things he's trying to do for indie artists, for instance, not publishing his stuff on Audible, even though he could make a lot more money doing that, but going with indie publishers that will give indie authors a better cut of their royalties to try and encourage other platforms than Audible to take off, right? Like he's physically, financially taking a hit to support indie authors. When I hear him in person talking to another person about that process, boom, even though he doesn't know me, I have a relationship with him, a parasocial relationship, but a relationship. And now I'm like, I liked him before, and I'd talk about his novels when they came up, but like I will say Brandon Sanderson whenever I can because I have that relationship with him now, right? Like that's the business, and that's the business you ought to think about. This is hard for a lot of authors and artists because you're introverts. But a lot of people who are creators are also introverts. They just learn how to talk to the camera like one of their best friends. And anyway, that is the way to AI proof your business. And does this finally pass the Luddite test? Since I've been, habitually complaining that the things Hello Future Me says won't save the Luddites. Well, if people had like a passionate relationship with their weavers, would they buy from a machine? Like, well, I mean, maybe some people who couldn't afford that if it's a premium, but like, actually, yes, we see people buy handmade stuff on Etsy, right? Because, I mean, some of that, again, I think does go back to the relationship they have to buying something handmade. But another thing is, like, that what people like about Etsy is they kind of feel more like they're forming a relationship with the person who's creating their clothes or creating this or that. They like them as a person. So, like, the handmade cloth, the handmade clothing, I guess these people aren't weaving for the most part, but like the handmade clothes, for example, that people still buy is often because of a sense of relationship. So I think it does pass the Luddite test, and this is where we need to go. This is a relationship is something that even if an AI art can't imitate, which I don't think it will fully for the Black Mirror reason, right? Even if it could imitate, I think human beings are still likely to value human relationships. And probably what's going to happen, this is my prediction, what's going to happen is this AI will be a great time for indie authors and artists as long as Hello Future Me does not convince the courts to like refuse copyright law to the only human person involved in a substantial creative work. But, as long as that doesn't happen, I think it'll be a great time for them as long as they're also good about forming this relationship. I think it's really going to be a hard time for people who want to just paint by themselves or just sit in a room and draw, sit in a room and type out a novel by themselves and, hope that a traditional company will publish and market it all for them without them having to build a platform, a relationship, etc. with the potential readers. So, and lastly, this is something you could do now to improve your business, regardless of whatever happens with AI art. Create a relationship. It does not have to be a YouTube video relationship. You can do it in just creating a group and a newsletter, geeking out about the same genre movies or books or games that come out. You can do it on some people do it on Twitter. Pick your platform, whatever feels most natural, and just spend some regular time investing in those relationships. So, and that will AI proof your art, but it'll also beef up your business right now, right? Don't wait until you have your book written or you have this huge portfolio of art to start building that platform, because these relationships don't have to be just over your own art. The most compelling stuff is, for instance, of Adam of Lucid Pixel that I mentioned, is not him telling me how good his art is. It's just hearing his stories about becoming an artist and the challenges he went through. So that relationship, that is what's going to sell now, and it's what's going to sell in an AI-dominated future. So this has been a long video. If you're concerned about the future of AI art, if you disagree with me, respond below. If you agree with Hello Future Me, respond in his video and below. Subscribe if you're interested in how to run a business as an indie sci-fi fantasy creator. That's what I'm building this channel for. I want to fix the internet for sci-fi and fantasy creators, and I will continue to be concerned with AI, its impact on the industry, for good or for ill. I don't think it will all be bad. I think there's some ways that it really might help authors and artists, and not just in pumping out lots of material. So subscribe, and help me help support indie authors and creators.